Hi, welcome to the February edition of my year of extreme productivity experiments. So this is the month of the Diceman, looking back over my experiment of 2013 in February and looking at what I've done since then and how that experiment has influenced me since. So what was the idea? So the idea was I would make decisions by the throw of a dice. I actually had two dice. I never know whether it's dice or die. I'm just going to say dice. Probably wrong, but just ignore me. So I'd have two dice that just lived in my back pocket, and I would use one of them or both of them. At any point where I wasn't sure of the decision I was going to make, I would just take out the dice, come up with some options, and just throw the dice and let the dice rule the decision rather than me rule the decision. So what was the hypothesis behind doing that? Really, I wanted to test out this old Yorkshire saying, which lots of people around this time were telling me about this same saying, which goes, you get a third of your decisions right, you get a third of your decisions wrong, and a third of them don't matter at all. And I think we have this big issue with decision making, and I think it can be a barrier to productivity because we just care. We just care about the decision that we're going to make. We really want to get it right, and what happens as a result of that is we cling on to decisions. We make decisions as late in the day as possible. We avoid making decisions because we're scared of getting it wrong. We're scared of what happens if we just make a wrong move. And I think one of the things that was interesting for me around this whole thing, and something that I was thinking about before, and something that really the experiment proved, was that really any decision trumps indecision. So as long as you're making any decision, as long as you're creating some kind of momentum, even if it's momentum in the wrong direction, you can always turn that back round. Sometimes I find it's easy with lots of stuff that you might be stuck on to just have something to disagree with. You know, just have a starting point, even if it's like seeing the words on the page that you don't want, even if it's like seeing that piece of graphic design and seeing that it's totally not what you imagined. Sometimes you kind of need that to go, and here's why, and here's how I can then get towards the correct thing, or the thing that I think is most useful here. So that was the idea. Make the decision by the throw of a dice whenever I felt. So it wasn't like every decision. It wasn't like breathe, yes or no, roll the dice. And it wasn't like, here's how I'm going to structure everything in my day by the throw of a dice. It's really just, I was just using it at any point that I felt procrastination, I felt stuck, I felt indecision. It was like, okay, I'm going to ask the dice. So straight away, as soon as that happened, my sort of habit that formed over the course of the month was to pick out one dice or two, make some choices, make some decisions, go from there. So that was the idea. A few examples of that. So I remember being in a restaurant. We got to dessert. It turned out there were six types of ice cream on the dessert menu, and you could have like 3 scoops. So I just literally was like, all right, okay. Good. So I ended up having 1 scoop of banana and 2 scoops of pistachio. And I would never normally pick pistachio, but suddenly it was like this was something fresh and different that I would never have otherwise, would never be a flavour I'd normally go for. And also the waitress just looked at me really weird, like, you want 2 of pistachio and 1 of banana, like, and she was watching me, roll the dice and stuff. On a slightly more serious note, we were negotiating a contract for one of our licensees. And there was a particular clause in the contract that I didn't really understand, they didn't really understand, and it was like, okay, what do we do about that? So I set up some different options, like, number 1, just leave it in and forget about it and know that we'll never think about this again. Number 2 was just delete it completely, and number 3, just reword it in terms of how we think it should be, and just do that. And we picked number 3, so that, okay, reword it, what do we think it should be? So I don't know whether that's going to come back and bite me on the backside at some point in the future, but I think just not being hung up on this one tiny little thing that probably doesn't really matter, that we're going to hold up this entire process over, and just going, actually, let's just get moving. Actually doesn't matter that much. I think, and I hope. A couple of other things. So there's one time when I came out of an evening class, and it was like 9 in the evening, and I felt totally awake and alive by the fact that just done this class and I was really motivated and everything. I was like, right, I just noticed in myself I've got loads of energy, so I'm going to give myself 3 options. So if I roll a 1 or a 2, then it was, okay, I'm going to go out and socialise with some people. If it was a 3 or a 4, I was going to go home and put that energy to work. I was going to burn the midnight oil, work through until at least 12 o'clock. Number 5 and 6 was I was just going to veg on the sofa, watch telly, drink beer, and just have a nice time of it. So you'll notice, even within the random choice of the dice, I've set that up. Two of those things are like very pleasurable, and one of those things is not so nice, and I'll leave you to work out which way around that is. But like, I actually threw a 3 and ended up having to go home and put that energy to work and like work through till midnight. So I was a bit like, oh, that's annoying. But there was something really nice about not having that decision down to me and have that decision just down to the dice. So I couldn't feel guilty if I'd rolled a 5 and ended up vegging out in front of the sofa. There was no guilt because I hadn't made the decision. It was the dice. It was nothing to do with me. This is the thing that really started to happen in that month as a whole, is that so much of the way we think about things is really ingrained in us. And we think that we only have one option or 2 options, and often we have loads of different options of things that we can do. So having 6 sides on the dice makes you think about either creating 6 different options, or it makes you think, okay, odds and evens, let's go with 2, or you might go, right, number 1 and 2 we're going to do this, number 3 or 4 we're going to do this. So there's kind of a 3 option thing going on. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can approach how you set up the decisions, but it really sort of tested my thinking in a couple of different ways. One was this idea of like knowing that you can have 6 different options for something, and making you think of the crazy outlandish options, which once you're doing that on a semi-regular basis as part of the process of rolling the dice, you start to do it in the rest of your life at the same time. So you start to just not be so ingrained with doing it the same old, doing it the way you've always done it, doing it the status quo. You suddenly start to get this kind of sense of, I have this world of possibility and I can just do anything and think about things in different ways. So it really had a very profound effect on me in terms of thinking about life choices, thinking about creativity, thinking about happiness, like all of that sort of stuff. It was, really opening up. I think we often close down our options just generally in life, and I think it really opened up options for me in so many different ways. Second thing, in terms of the actual sort of nature of decision making. So I mentioned before, like we have this anxiety about wanting to get decisions right. Decision making is generally all very heavily connected to the ego. So detaching yourself from the ego, detaching the decision from your ego, and just being like, this is a decision that I can't be blamed for, I can't take credit for, it just is. That sounds like a little bit hippie in way out, I know, but like just knowing that I was just liberated from the responsibility of having to make decisions and live by them in that kind of way was really, really amazing. And if you've read the book, The Diceman, a lot of that book talks about this idea of just liberating yourself from the guilt that comes from that, and from the sort of anxiety of those choices and the anxiety of those decisions. If you think about, so there's some really good writing that you can find around how Barack Obama sets his life up so that he's so focused on the decisions that he needs to make for the government and for his presidency. So he only has 2 types of suit. He obviously doesn't have a car. Like there's all these things in his life that he has set up to deliberately never have to make a decision about. And it's so that he can really focus that time and energy on the stuff that really matters. Another really good example of that is Gilbert and George. We did a blog post a couple of years ago, what Gilbert and George can teach us about productivity. There's a really great interview where they talk about how they eat out every single night, and they eat out at the same restaurants on the same day. So they'll go to one restaurant on a Monday, another restaurant on a Tuesday, and they'll have the same thing off the menu each time. And then when they get bored of that thing, they'll change it maybe after kind of 6 months or something and pick something else off that same menu or go to a different restaurant. But they just have this routine that means that they're never sat there in the middle of the day thinking, what do I need to buy to cook my dinner, or which restaurant are we going to? There's no decision, like it's just done. And it allows them to be really dedicated and focused to what they love, which is creating the work that they do. So I just think there's this idea of decision fatigue as a very underrated thing in productivity. I think learning to manage the number of decisions and the breadth of decisions that we need to take, getting as much as we can automated, getting as much as we can set up in some kind of way that we just never have to think about it, so that we've really got that focus on identifying the real possibility within the stuff that matters. So it was a really interesting month. The other thing that was a lovely surprise that month is Luke Reinhardt's, the author of the original book, The Diceman, which was the sort of inspiration really behind doing the month, commented on my blog. So I did a blog post just about how I'd surrendered these decisions to the dice, and he wrote this really lovely comment just saying thanks for doing the experiment and thanks for living by the dice. And all this kind of stuff. So that kind of made my month, really. That was really exciting to get a personal response from Luke Reinhardt. And totally unsolicited, he must just have like a Google alert set up. So if you're watching this, hi Luke, and really your work inspired me to create the month, and it was a really great experiment to do. And what have I done since then? So I have to confess, I don't carry around the dice with me all the time. The dice actually just sits in my drawer in my office, in my home office here. So I do have it, at my disposal. And sometimes just knowing that it's a bit like Dumbo's feather, just knowing that it's there, knowing that I can pick up the dice, just encourages me to think about possibilities, encourages me to think about going wider than just the 2 choices that we tend to give ourselves, and opening it up to maybe 5 or 6 or 3 or whatever. And also just knowing that there is always a decision to be made, and that any decision trumps indecision. So just make a decision, get things moving. Don't try and hang on to stuff and hold on to stuff because you're worried about the outcome. Just make a decision, just get it moving. So there'll be something on your to-do list right now that is affected by that. There'll be something on your to-do list that you're hanging on to because you don't want to make a decision. Just make one. Doesn't matter if it's right, doesn't matter if it's wrong. Just make a decision, get it moving. There'll be other decisions you can make further down the line that will rectify things if they go wrong. But just get it moving, make a decision. So that's the month of February. Encourage you to play around with that idea of decision making. Maybe live your life for a week or a day by the throw of a dice. See what possibilities that opens up for you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.